We are back on the record in State of Arizona versus Ramon Luna Bueno, CR 2014-149887-001. Let the record reflect the presence of counsel and the defendant. The witness is in the room, the jury is not. Are we ready to continue?
We are, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Sir, if you want to come back and take the witness stand, we'll get the jury. Please be seated. Everyone, I hope you had a good lunch break. We will continue with the direct examination. Direct examination, sorry.
Over the lunch hour, Mr. Beddow, did you go back to your office and find something to better explain to the jurors what you were talking about with a revolver and the debris that can be left behind on items after it's been shot?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you bring that photo in for demonstrative purposes?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, for demonstrative purposes, the state would like to publish Exhibit 280.
No objection.
Exhibit 280 may be published.
Now, explain to us what this image is of.
May I approach the screen again as well?
Yes. And is this something that was, it'll pop up, it's slow, sleeping. Is this something that you prepared to teach a class?
It was part of a class that I was taking. I have also prepared very similar circumstances for instruction that I have provided.
So tell us what we're looking at here, sir.
What we are looking at in this image is a .357 Magnum revolver that is laying on the trunk of a car, a white painted car. The purpose for this test when we were in our training class was to lay the revolver physically on the trunk of the vehicle and discharge it in order to demonstrate what type of debris and information can be gleaned from both the cylinder gap as well as from the muzzle. So the vertical line of burning and soot that you see is produced by the gases and material escaping the cylinder gap, and then this information to the front is produced by the muzzle blast.
Thank you, sir. I now would like to talk to you about the analysis that you did in this case on items of evidence. We talked about just identifying item number 28 that you looked at.
Yes, ma'am.
Item number 0001. What was that you analyzed?
Item number 1 from invoice 4378962.
And I'm going to use just the last 4 digits because none of them overlap, correct?
Correct.
All right, so item number 1.
Item number 1 was 1 bullet jacket fragment and several lead fragments.
Where was that taken from?
Referring to the item description, this would be bullet fragments received from Dr. Jack Burhow, B-U-H-R-O-W.
Would that have been one of the treating physicians of James Casey?
To my knowledge, yes.
And item 003?
003 was a small bullet jacket fragment. Also recovered at the hospital based on description.
Okay, and now 0029.
.29 was 1 fired .357 Magnum cartridge case.
Okay. And item 32.
32 were bullet jacket fragments and lead fragments.
was item 29 found?
Based on item description, 29 was found in the rear driver's side door cubby, upper.
The blue Mercury Sable?
It does not state that specifically, so I would assume yes.
Would that correspond to the photographs that we looked at earlier in your testimony regarding the marking of items that were impounded in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And 32, where did that come from?
The headliner, there was more information located with, but it ultimately was from the headliner of the vehicle.
And is that what we discussed and looked at prior to the lunch break, which was between the mat and the fabric on the roof of the vehicle, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us what you did, and also, let me just ask you this. Did you also look at item number 16?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what was that?
Item number 16 was one .40 caliber jacketed hollow point bullet.
And was that found on the rear passenger side floor of the Mercury Sable?
Yes, ma'am.
And would that correspond to the evidence photos in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us what you did to conduct your analysis in this case.
So with all the items of evidence, once they're received into my custody, the first task is to document the packaging for the items to ensure that all the seals are intact so that I can guarantee that as I'm working forward from there, everything received to my condition had been fully documented. Once I've completed that analysis, then I'll move through taking detailed notes on each item as to what we refer to as their class characteristics, as well as the presence of any trace material, damage, or other observations that are pertinent to be documented on that item. So when I say class characteristics, I'm meaning their general features. So like class characteristics would be something like dictating a Chevy half-ton pickup. Those are class characteristics so that if I just said pickup truck, you wouldn't know whether it was a Chevy or a Ford and what size of truck. So in this case, we'll go through and determine with the bullet fragments, we'll go through and determine their caliber, their design, what type of rifling was transferred onto them by the firearm, and then document trace material and damage.
Okay, let's start talking about rifling. What is rifling?
Rifling is high spots and low spots. Think of kind of like the turrets on a castle that are intentionally machined into the barrel of a firearm with either right hand or left hand twist. The purpose of this is so that when the bullet is fired, it will engage that rifling and impart gyroscopic spin, so stability to that bullet. So it's like throwing a football. If you grab it by the laces and throw a nice tight spiral, increased accuracy, precision. If you grab it by the end and throw it, wobbles end over end. Well, the rifling causes that bullet to spin and fly so you can have increased accuracy and precision.
What are class characteristics?
Class characteristics with regards to bullets would be their diameter, so what actual diameter the physical bullet is, the number of lands and grooves, the direction of twist, and then the physical measurements of how wide are those lands and grooves, as well as bullet design.
What is a land and groove related to ammunition?
The lands and grooves are the rifling. So the high spots are the lands, the low spots are the grooves.
We did talk about ammunition. What about as it relates to firearms? Are there similar class characteristics?
Yes, many different firearms can possess similar class characteristics, but they also possess some class characteristics that may differ, and this will allow us to sort what type of firearm a projectile may have been fired from into a smaller subcategory.
What are individual characteristics?
Individual characteristics are characteristics that are present on the machined surfaces within the gun, so such as the rifling, the firing pin, or other areas that are created during manufacture or incidental to manufacture. When I say incidental to manufacture, I mean like damage, wear, things of that nature. And the ones created during manufacture are unintended. So they're microscopic imperfections that are on the surface of those machine parts within the gun that can be transferred to the ammunition during the firing process, and they're unique to each firearm.
When you say they're unique to each firearm, why is it that two firearms that were of the same caliber and the same manufacturer would be different?
What will allow the differences are those microscopic imperfections and subsequent wear. So we as forensic firearms examiners, as well as people within academia, so colleges, have studied the idea of the surface topography of tool marks. So whether it be the tools that make the barrel, the tools that make the firing pins, etc., as to whether or not those microscopic imperfections are reproducible. And we've studied these things from within the same make and model, all the way to going to manufacturers and having parts made for us consecutively. So 10 barrels kept in order, made with the same machine, and we can shoot those and differentiate every single one from another based on those microscopic individual characteristics.
I would like to first start with number 16. Actually, let me grab one more. What did you do to analyze item 16?
Item number 16, once it was removed from its packaging after everything was documented, with the aid of a stereo zoom microscope, so a relatively low magnification microscope, looked over the entire bullet for any material that needed to be documented or collected first, and then followed with documenting all of its class characteristics and information present. It was determined to be a 40 Smith & Wesson, or a bullet similar to those loaded into 40 Smith & Wesson ammunition, so 40 caliber, a jacketed hollow point bullet, similar to Spear Gold Dot ammunition. There was also some possible biological material that was observed on the tip of the bullet, and that was documented, collected, and sub-itemed and preserved for potential future analysis.
Was that similar to the ammunition that was used by Trooper Alfano and Trooper Cruz?
Yes, this is consistent with DPS's duty ammunition.
What did you do to analyze item number 28?
The process would be the same, so going through both visually and under a microscope, documenting all the features that I see. This one was determined to be a 38 caliber bullet jacket or jacket fragment, consistent with those known to be loaded into 38 special and or 357 Magnum cartridges. Its construction was also determined to be either a jacketed hollow point or jacketed, semi-jacketed hollow point. So meaning you would have some exposed lead at the front before the jacket begins, or completely jacketed. But being only a fragment, I wasn't able to completely determine its original construction.
I'd like to stick with item number 28. Did you do an analysis related to the fragments that were taken from Trooper Casey?
Yes, ma'am.
Related to item 28.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us what your conclusion was.
The conclusion between item number 1 and item number 28 was that they could not be conclusively identified or excluded as having been fired in the same firearm. However, it was likely that they were fired in the same firearm.
How could you come to that conclusion that it was likely?
So when we're looking at these bullets microscopically, so before reaching the point of actually completing my comparison, I analyzed item number 1 the same as I would have item number 28. So looking at it and determining all its class characteristics. Once I determined that it possessed similar class characteristics as item number 28, then I moved forward with my physical comparison. Once we go to the comparison, we're utilizing a different type of microscope known as a comparison microscope that allows us to mount both items so we can look at them at the same time and begin to attempt to match or find dissimilarities within the individual characteristics on that projectile.
If you had found one dissimilarity, would you have excluded it?
No, ma'am, one dissimilarity would not be sufficient.
what would be sufficient for an exclusion?
Sufficient, in order to exclude, that could occur either through differences in class characteristics or a extreme volume of differences within individuals, or individual characteristics. So even from shot to shot of the same gun, because we're dealing with a very dynamic process, when I say dynamic, lots of moving parts within a gun, there will be subtle differences even within test fires fired from the same gun. So not an absolute perfect correspondence from shot to shot.
Was there agreement with all class characteristics?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there some individual characteristics, but there wasn't enough for an identification?
Correct, and that's how I arrived at the conclusion that it was likely to have been fired in the same firearm. However, I could not conclusively say that it had been.
Do you have an opinion as it relates to the firearm that was used to shoot bullet jacket 28?
It is my belief that it was a revolver, based on my analysis of the evidence.
How do you come to that conclusion, sir?
The characteristics that are present on the fragment itself, so it's designed. It's designed to be fired in ammunition that is, for the most part, intended for revolvers. So my conclusion was that it was either a 38 special or a 357. And that is the name of the cartridges that type of bullet is generally loaded into. The vast majority of all firearms chambered in 38 special and 357 Magnum are revolvers, as well as I also performed what's called a firearms prediction. So I take the class characteristics and the dimensions in which that I measured of the rifling, input all that into a database, and it kicks back a list of possible makes and models of guns. And in this case, the firearms that were returned on that were also revolvers.
Now, I believe we got to it. Item 32.
Yes, ma'am.
You looked at, where was that located?
32 was the item from the headliner.
And should have said item 28. Did you look at those two pieces of evidence together?
Yes, I did.
And did you have a conclusion?
The jacket fragment part of item 32, because it had both jacket and lead, based on the jacket fragment portion, it possesses similar rifling to that was on item number 28. However, it was damaged to the point that I couldn't say it was of the same design. So it possesses similar rifling. However, that's as far as I could go with that analysis due to the extent of damage.
I'm going to put exhibit 278, image W, up on Yellow. Is that where item 28 was found in the vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was it exactly?
28 was a bullet jacket fragment found based off of the image in the trunk of the vehicle towards what would be the back of the trunk, up against the rear seat.
Did you come to that conclusion based upon the exact same analysis that you did for 32, the headliner projectile?
Yes, ma'am.
And so you would have the same conclusion regarding the type of weapon that was fired?
For the type of weapon for physically conducting a prediction for item number 32, there's insufficient information because of how damaged it was. So my conclusions are it has similar rifling, but I can't say anything beyond that because it was so damaged.
You actually have an opinion regarding the models of the 357 Magnum revolvers, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is your opinion regarding the type of model that may have been used in this case of the firearm?
The most likely models, so this database that we utilize was originally started and maintained by the FBI, and it's known as the General Rifling Characteristics Database. It's as all-inclusive as it can be, but it does not include absolutely every gun that's ever been made or will be made, because it's relying upon the FBI and us as forensic firearms examiners to give them the data. It's as good as we can make it, but the list that was returned, the most likely candidates were revolvers manufactured by Astra, Llama, Rossi, and Taurus. There were other manufacturers, however, those are the most common, and I felt therefore the most likely.
What is your opinion regarding all of the projectiles and spent cartridge casings that were recovered in this case regarding the number of firearms that were part of this event?
A minimum number of 2.
And how do you come to that conclusion, sir?
I can reach that conclusion purely based upon the caliber of the evidence that was recovered from the vehicle. There was 40 caliber bullets recovered, as well as 38 caliber. And these 2 different dimension and size bullets are not interchangeable within the same firearm.
At this time, the state moves exhibit number 72 into evidence.
No objection.
Exhibit 72 is admitted and may be published.
Mr. Beddow, I'm going to show you what has been admitted as exhibit 72. Does that appear to be item number 29 that was impounded and that you reviewed?
Yes, ma'am, it does. Yes.
Would you mind opening it up? If you could look at the headstand on item number 29, is that the one that we discussed was in the rear passenger door?
Yes, ma'am.
You're not going to be able to see that headstand, are you?
I am now, yes.
Could you, now that was the one that was found in the car, correct?
Correct.
Now, these other items, if we heard testimony that they were found along the railroad tracks earlier today, 16, 17, 18, and 19, could you look at those items, same process, and tell us if they appear to be the same type of ammunition?
And am I permitted to open these as well?
Is that okay, Your Honor?
No objection?
No objection.
They may be opened.
Now that you've had an opportunity to look at the 4 that were found by the railroad tracks and the expended cartridge casing found in the Sable, do you have an opinion regarding whether they are similar types of ammunition?
Yes, ma'am, they are. Item number 29 was a fired cartridge case, so no longer had the bullet or gunpowder. The remaining exhibits, so 16, 17, 18, and 19 are all unfired .357 Magnum cartridges, so they still have the bullet and the powder contained within the cartridge. They're the same brand and possess the same head stamp.
You have conducted extensive research regarding firearms, seeing construction with firearms, and those types of scenarios. Is that fair?
I've participated in research, yes.
Is it common for those who participated or been part of, quite frankly, shootings to hear the sound of a gun in a different way, even though they all may have heard the same shot?
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that?
Human response to stimulus can vary from person to person, especially under stressful conditions. So some people, this is most commonly found in hunting situations. So a lot of hunters, when they go hunting, will never hear the gunshot when they discharge their firearm. And this is due to heightened levels of stress and awareness and other biological aspects beyond my expertise. But it's very common for people to hear things different, especially in stressful situations, as it relates to gunfire.
In this case, was it your opinion that the bullet jacket 28, though, could have been fired and was likely fired from the same firearm that went into Officer Casey's face?
Yes, ma'am.
Or projectiles that were taken out of Officer Casey's face?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is your opinion regarding that caliber?
The caliber of the fragments would be .38 caliber and consistent with having been loaded in either .38 Special or .357 Magnum cartridges.
Revolver?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Thank you, Judge.
Would you like these items sealed before we continue, or just so we can?
Oh, that's up to the state.
Okay.
How long ago had that fired cartridge been fired?
I have no way of knowing.
Thank you. That's all I have, Judge.
Thank you. Ms. Dahl?
I have nothing further. Thank you.
It appears we have a couple of juror questions. Starting with the first question, was there evidence to indicate that more shots were fired from the roof of the Sable than the 3 which impacted the roof from the driver's side?
Based on the evidence that I was provided, I would have no way to say whether more shots were fired than the 3 that were on top. And that's based off of there's 3 impacts on the roof. Any that would not have struck, I would not be able to say whether they had or had not been fired.
How accurate are trajectory rods in determining direction?
Relatively accurate, but it's going to depend upon the media in which the bullet goes through. So if the bullet goes through and leaves a nice clean hole, you'll end up with a more accurate result. If you shoot something such as glass, and let's say it has a tinting on it, but the hole is much larger, then you'll start reducing accuracy. But when analysts perform trajectory reconstruction, they'll always add a plus or minus factor into their conclusions if they're reporting a physical measurement as opposed to a general direction.
Can a bullet change direction after the initial impact?
I'm going to answer this as if it's intended to mean a ricochet. So if a bullet impacts a surface that is hard enough to allow that bullet to bounce off, yes, the direction will change from its original direction of travel, or has the potential to change. and it will directly depend on the bullet's construction and whatever media it hit, as well as the angle in which it impacted that media.
Can the bullets which impacted the roof from the driver's side have a shallower angle than the rod?
The hole going through the roof, which was referenced as letter N as in Nancy, that would be the angle in which that bullet went through the roof, because there's 2 points of contact on that roof. There will be the potential for a slight deviation, maybe plus or minus a couple degrees, as that metal stretched before the bullet actually passed through, but the angle of that trajectory will be fairly close.
Is it possible to determine the order of impact of the bullets on the roof?
It is not possible to determine that unless they had been overlapping. Since they are spread apart, there would be no way to determine an order of fire.
Given the small angle, delta, between the travel line and the roof line, the plane, would it be expected that during the initial contact of the bullet with the car metal that some deflection of the bullet path would occur that would result in a trajectory rod to indicate a smaller angle of incidence between the travel line and the roof plane original angle?
There is potential for that to occur, and what that's meaning is as a bullet is coming into that roof at a specific angle, as it impacts that metal, all materials, and roof metal included, does have some elastic potential to it. So it will deform to a certain point before it gives way and the bullet passes through. So during that deformation and, in essence, stretching of the metal, there is the potential for a slight deviation of the angle in which the bullet is traveling prior to the metal giving way. So once again, this is why if actually calculating and giving a specific angle, we would give a plus or minus factor to it. And it's generally in our field accepted at around plus or minus 5 degrees for up close shootings. Now, if we're dealing with something much longer, we would try to narrow that down a little bit.
Which fragments were found in James Casey's head?
Those would have been listed as item number 1. And were determined to be similar in construction with the fragment 28, which was determined to be .38 caliber.
Were there any bullets or fragments concluded to be from the shooter, that's in quotes, or at least not from the police officers?
Yes. Items number 28, 1, 3, and 32 were not fired by either of the officers' 40 Smith & Wesson chambered Sig Sauer pistols, and this is based on rifling dimensions as well as caliber.
Can a full metal jacket bullet be shot from a revolver?
Yes, they can. With regards to bullet shape, it's not specific. The important part is the bullet diameter.
Was this believed to be from the shooter's gun? The full metal jacket bullet?
In this case, I did not receive any projectiles that I determined to be full metal jacket. There were fragments that I was unable to say what their original design was, but item 28 and 1 were from jacketed hollow point style bullets.
Is there a way to determine if a spent casing and an unspent casing were manufactured in the same batch?
Yes, there is. That is a process that we called a bunter tool comparison. Bunter being B-U-N-T-E-R. So when you look at the bottom of a casing, there's information about the caliber and generally a manufacturer. So like in this case, these ones said 357 mag and Winchester. The tool at the manufacturer that physically stamps that information in there is called the bunter. So because that tool is a machined component, it will have microscopic tool marks on it that can subsequently and will be transferred to all of the casings that it makes. This comparison can be conducted, and it will tell you that it was made, if we come to the conclusion of an ID, that it was made by the same tool. However, how many casings were made by that same tool can be in the thousands, tens of thousands.
Given that answer, was the casing found in the left rear door of the car determined to be from the same batch as the ones recovered at the railroad tracks?
That specific analysis was not requested for me to perform.
Does DPS use both 40 and 38 caliber weapons? Could all the items, although differing in caliber, have come from DPS weapons?
To my knowledge, the only 3 weapons that were at the scene from DPS were the 2 40 Smith & Wesson caliber Sig Sauer pistols and 1 380 Auto chambered Sig Sauer pistol. The evidence items 28, 1, and 32, based on their rifling, could not have come from any of those 3 weapons.
Thank you. Ms. Dahl, any follow-up?
In fact, you did follow up because the 380 Auto Sig Sauer was the backup firearm for Alfonso Cruz, correct?
That is correct.
And you conducted an analysis, and the items recovered did not match that that could have been fired from that firearm. Is that right?
That is correct.
How many rounds typically does a revolver hold?
The most common is 6 in full size, and in the small subcompact revolvers, it is 5.
And in the firearm that you believe most likely to have been used in this case, how many does that hold?
Based on the marks that were on the roof of the vehicle, so from the muzzle blast and the cylinder gap, they gave a barrel length of about 3 inches. So I would assume it would be a full-size revolver based on that barrel length, and so therefore most likely 6.
Nothing further, thank you.
Mr. Lorenz?
I have no questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any further juror questions? Seeing none, that does conclude your testimony. Thank you very much for coming in. You are excused.
Thank you very much.
Counsel, do you want these resealed?
Yes, I can clean it up, Your Honor.
Okay. Again, to the jurors, while we're waiting, if you want to take a stretch break in place, you're more than welcome to.
The state calls Kendra Griffee to the stand.
Ms. Griffee, if you could please come forward and be sworn in by the clerk.
Please state and spell your first and your last name.
My first name is Kendra Griffee, and my last name is Griffee. Kendra. Last name is GRI. 2 F's like Frank, 2 E's like Echo.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Ms. Griffee. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Kendra Griffee, and I'm the supervisor of the Forensic Imaging Unit for the Phoenix Police Department.
And as a supervisor, I didn't mean to set up, I meant like speak up.
Thank you.
Before, can we pull that microphone closer? That bar is a microphone. You just want to...
And if the court will allow, this is a trick of those gates.
Yes.
Could you put that on top of it?
On top.
No, other way. The microphone on top of the box.
Thank you. I apologize. I had cold.
It's okay, we have more
boxes if you need them too.
Thank you.
What do you do as a supervisor for the Phoenix Crime Lab,
For the Forensic Imaging Unit,
Forensic Imaging Unit?
the Forensic Imaging Unit's main responsibility is to archive and distribute all of the digital media evidence for the department. So that's all of the photographs, all of the digital audio recordings. We maintain the older video interview system. And most recently, one of our forte has become collecting surveillance video.
Very briefly, could you give us your training experience and background that makes you qualified to be part of that unit?
So I went to Arizona State University and I was studying fine art photography. During that time, I was also working in professional portrait studios and in photo labs, learning the process of high-end photography and balancing color correcting, high-quality professional wedding photography and things of that nature. When I joined the Phoenix Police Department, they had switched from a film-based photography system to a digital-based photography system. And as we evolved more into that digital age, we started collecting surveillance video because there was nobody that had the skills and forte to do that type of thing. In 2012, we spent 3 weeks of high-intensity training to become certified video technicians through the Law Enforcement and Video Association. And with that, we learned proper handling of digital media evidence and how to properly download surveillance video, how to properly archive it, and make sure that we're following all the steps necessary for the best practice of digital evidence.
Were you working at the crime lab or digital forensic science unit?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me just say, you went from weddings to crime scenes, is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
But you had intensive training at a law enforcement academy type setting?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you working back on October 2014?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you become involved in this particular investigation?
Yes, I did.
Tell us what you did to help investigate the shooting of Trooper Casey, Cruz, and Alfano.
I was asked to collect surveillance video from a business off of 29th Avenue and Buckeye. The business was Cold AC Repair / Internet Cafe. It's a pretty unique business.
Well, tell us what the business is, because it is unique, right?
I'm sorry?
Tell us what the business is.
So the business is kind of two-sided, where the east side of the building was to repair car air conditioning, and so it was kind of chock full of car parts and air conditioning repair parts. And then the west side of the building was kind of like a portable or a trailer, and in there were several computer stations, and it was an internet cafe for people to use their internet service.
Was it a 24-hour business?
Yes, ma'am, I believe it is.
And what time and what day did you go there to conduct surveillance video?
I went to collect surveillance video on October 10th, and we got there at about 3:30 in the afternoon.
When you got there, who did you meet with?
I was with Detective John Tusink with the homicide unit.
And was there an employee or manager that was at the business?
Yes, ma'am, we were serving the search warrant to the assistant manager on duty.
So was there a search warrant to get the surveillance footage from that particular business?
Yes, ma'am.
That had been signed by the judge?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you present that to the assistant manager?
Detective Tusink presented that search warrant to the assistant manager.
Did you observe his response?
He was trying to turn us away and have us come back when the managers or the owners were available.
Was there something odd that the assistant manager did when you were trying to get the surveillance footage pursuant to the warrant?
He was bouncing back and forth between two sides of the business while he was on the phone with the managers and the owners. Somehow the slip and went into this office where the system was stored after telling us that he didn't have the combination to get into the office. It was a push button lock on the door, and he was on the phone with the managers, and he was bouncing back and forth, and we were trying to follow him back and forth and all around through this business. And after waiting about 10 minutes or so in the internet cafe side of the business where this office was, the door opened and this assistant manager walks out with the DVR, and we didn't know he was in there, and we didn't know what else was in there. We can't just receive items handed over to us. We have to do an inspection of this system, make sure that we had all the parts that we needed, and he tried to slam the door shut, stopping us from getting into the office.
Did you go into the office?
After a pretty heated discussion about it, we were able to get into the office, yes, ma'am.
But you ultimately, after this heated discussion, were able to get into the office?
Yes.
As part of the process of executing the search warrant to get that surveillance footage, what did you do to document the steps you took to ensure, to document it?
So I took photographs of the DVR. It looks similar to a cable box. As it was handed over to us by the assistant manager, we document the sticker, which will have the serial number and the make and model of the system, the back of the DVR where the connections are, the cables that were attached to the system, and I needed to then additionally collect the power supply for the DVR because that wasn't being provided to us, so I had to get the power plug out of the wall so that we would be able to operate the DVR back at the office.
Conor, may I approach?
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 275. Ms. Griffee? 276 and 277. Could you please look at those items and tell me if you recognize them?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
How do you recognize them, ma'am?
I have one set of photographs of the pictures that I took to document the scene or the office where the DVR had been stored.
Is that, what exhibit is
I
that?
apologize. Number 275 are the photographs that I took of the office, the DVR as it was turned over to me, and then the menu settings of the DVR as I was processing the DVR for evidence.
The state moves Exhibit 275 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
And can you confirm for me what it's photos what through what?
Judge, it is photos A through CC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Exhibit 275 is admitted and may be published.
Thank you. Exhibit 276, do you recognize what's in 276?
Yes, ma'am. These are still images that I made from the surveillance video, which we collected from the internet cafe.
And are those images A through CC?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
The state moves Exhibit 276 into evidence.
Exhibit 276 is admitted and may be published.
Thank you, Judge. Exhibit 277, do you recognize that, ma'am?
Yes, this is a CD with the surveillance video that I collected from the Cold Air Internet Cafe.
Did you review that prior to your testimony today?
Yes, I did.
And did you actually initial it and put the date of the review again on it?
Yes, I did.
And does that fairly and accurately show what you saw during your processing of that footage?
Yes, it does.
The state moves Exhibit 277 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
Exhibit 277 is admitted and may be published.
I'm going to now put Exhibit 275 up on the screen. Image A. Is that essentially just a documentation of the photos to come? Yes.
Yeah.
Image B, what are we looking at here, Ms. Griffee?
This is one corner of the office where the DVR was located.
Image C?
It's a secondary corner of the office, kind of documenting what the office layout was.
Image D?
Another image of the office, and that might have been the monitor that the DVR had been connected to before it was removed by the assistant manager.
Image E, ma'am?
Another corner, but it's also showing the doorway of the office, and in the background, you can see the internet cafe.
Image F.
This image was taken once we got the DVR back to our office for processing. It's to document how many cameras this system is capable of recording. There's 16 cameras that are capable for this particular model. And it's an image that we take to show the general layout of the DVR, and then it also lends to us documenting the timestamp of the system, and then we'll go through the menu settings from there as well.
Because a instrument is capable of having 16 cameras, does that mean that there was 16 cameras?
No, ma'am. It could have been any number of cameras up to 16.
Image G, what are we looking at here of Exhibit 275?
This is one of the menu settings that we refer to for the DVR's calibrations. So this is referring to what quality of video the image is being displayed at on that monitor that it had been connected to.
Image I, what are we looking at here?
This image is us doing our time calibration against the system. So what we do is if we have our cell phone and we hold it up next to the timestamp of the system, and we try and get it as accurate as possible. Sometimes when you're in this menu setting, though, the seconds pause as you pull up this tab, so we can't get it within the second when we calibrate using this method.
Was there something about the surveillance video that you retrieved and the documented time on the camera that was significant to you?
Yes, when we initially processed the DVR, the first step that we always do when we process is calibrate the time, so we know exactly what time to go to. So if there is a time discrepancy, we can account for it, make sure that we're getting the time that the incident had occurred. So when I initially processed the DVR using these system settings, we started reviewing the video that the detective had requested. Detective Eisentraut had asked us to pull video from October 8th at 3 in the morning up until 5 in the evening. So it's a big time span for us to go through and collect. Detective Two-Sync wanted to see if we could narrow that time frame down to get a little more specific. And as we were reviewing that video, the timestamp of the system got to be 9 in the morning, but the video that was being displayed was at night. And we could tell this by the headlights were on all the cars, it was dark out, and things of that nature.
And so what did you do to make a determination regarding what the actual time being captured on the surveillance video was?
So we played the system up until we could tell that it was either sunrise or sunset. In this case, we referred to the sunrise time, and we could tell based on the direction of the shadows whether it was sunrise or sunset. And we looked up the date and time we looked at the time sunrise was for the October 8th. And we found that sunrise had actually occurred that day at 6:28 in the morning.
Based upon reviewing the footage, which included footage from the exterior of the business, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And knowing when the footage was impounded and taken, could you go back and make a fairly accurate calculation as to how far off the time setting was?
Yes, so we used the time that we knew the system had been turned off.
Was that when you contacted the assistant manager?
Yes, ma'am. We were basing it off of that time.
And then did you go backwards?
Yes, we watched it backwards, and we found that to be a little slow and arduous. And so I had suggested to Detective Two-Sync if we could look at the system log of the DVR that would show any changes that were made to that DVR. And once we did that search, we found that the system time had been changed at 10:12. So we navigated to that time on the DVR, and once we played it for that minute of time, we saw that there was a snap from day to night. So somebody had adjusted the date and time on the DVR prior to us receiving it.
Would that cause someone who may have been familiar with that cafe to think that there was no surveillance video there? If they thought it had been tampered with?
It's not uncommon for people to, once we contact them to collect surveillance video, to either through curiosity or trying to help go and look at the video themselves. And then what people will sometimes do is notice that their system time is off and they'll make a correction to that date and time stamp. The time stamp was changed to be more accurate, so I don't know if they were intending to overwrite data or not, but initially, based off of the time calibration we did using sunrise, we found the system time had been 5 hours and 47 minutes fast.
I'm now going to put Exhibit 276 that had been admitted up on the stand. Are these imaging? Is this one of the images that was captured when you retrieved the surveillance video?
Yes, ma'am. After we navigated and verified with Detective Butcher that this was the subject she was looking for based off of information she had been given, she requested me to make these still images of the subject.
And were there multiple still images that you made?
Yes, ma'am. I believe there was 159 still images that we made of the person pointed out to us on the video.
And were those the ones that were captured in 276?
Yes, ma'am.
And in fairness, you can actually see the different camera angles in the top left of the images, right?
Yes, it'll have the camera channel stamped in the top corner.
And then the time, if we were to look at 9:39 here, 37, was it fast or slow, the time that had been off? 5:47, was it, in fact, earlier, or was it later? It was 5 hours.
And 47 minutes prior to this time. So it will be about 3. Can't do math.
We'll assume,
I
this
had
is what
one.
you're testifying, right?
Thank you.
Could
Yes.
you do the math right now on the stand now?
Oh, that was my first time testifying. It was terrible.
So it's 5 hours and 47 minutes earlier than 9:39.
Yes, ma'am.
Would that be between 3 and 4 a.m.?
Yes.
I want to turn your attention to image Q of Exhibit 276, which is now admitted at trial. What are we looking at here? Is that the subject?
Yes, this is the subject that was pointed out to us as he was walking around the internet cafe.
And image R, does it appear that he is getting a phone from another individual at that point?
Yes, ma'am, I believe that's what was happening.
I'll now go to image W. Does it appear to be a phone or a device?
Yes.
Judge, at this time, it's approximately 10 minutes. I'd like to play Exhibit 277, unless the court would like a break.
And do we anticipate playing it straight through?
Yes.
All right. No objection, I'm assuming?
No objection.
Let's play Exhibit 277.
And there is no sound, is that fair?
Yes, ma'am, there's no sound.
Your Honor, we're being technologically challenged right here. I don't anticipate having a whole lot of questions for this witness regarding the video because she's the individual who impounded it. Do you mind if I play it later in the trial?
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right. The video may be played later in the trial.
I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Lorenz?
I have no questions, Judge. Thank you.
There is at least one juror question. Counsel, please approach. First question, could the day setting have been wrong?
So there wasn't a way for us to check the day setting, and I was thinking about this while I was preparing for trial. There wasn't a way for us to look at the day, but based off of all of the information and the elements that were told to Detective Butcher about why we were even there, the incidents that had happened, people that the subject had met with, and the subject, or the person that the subject had met with, for instance, saying that they had a hammer in their pocket. All of those things matched up with the video to tell us that at that date and time when that witness told Detective Butcher they were there with the subject, all of that was happening in the video.
Was the timestamps Phoenix local time, Greenwich Mean Time, or Universal Time?
So in that menu setting where there were the timestamp, the system was set to GMT, General Mean Time, +7, which is usually your Arizona timestamp. So Greenwich time is the 0 line for time, and Arizona is +7 to that time. That is all great, but when the system time is set by a human, and things like the scroll ball of the mouse having an effect on how things are set, and people overlooking it, it comes into error. And it's very, very common for DVRs to have a very random time discrepancy, just because people are the ones that are setting those timestamps for those standalone DVRs.
How much time/footage was overwritten when the time was corrected?
That, I don't know. We never looked into that. And based off of the video that we collected, I believe we didn't collect video up until the time change, so we wouldn't have been able to determine that after we collected the evidence.
Thank you. Ms. Dahl, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. I think I'm on point is what I should have said.
Okay. At this time, we believe we've resolved the technical difficulties and are going to be able to play the video before you leave the stand.
Okay.
Dana, is it on?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Judge, it may take 5 minutes to reinstall, but it shouldn't take too much longer. I am going to ask the court's indulgence, Judge, for just a 5-minute break.
All right, we're actually going to take our 15-minute break. We will be back at just before 3:05. Please remember the admonition applies.
All rise for the jury.
Thank you. Please be seated. Ms. Griffee, you may step down. Record, chapter 3.
We have the expert here. It's a trick.